I didn't notice it at first. A headache, a chill I couldn't shake. The kind of thing you blame on bad sleep or skipping breakfast. Small, forgettable. So I forgot it. The elevator lights above me flickered as I leaned against the metal wall, staring at my reflection in the polished doors. Same tired eyes, same dull brown hair twisted into a loose bun, same corporate uniform, black slacks, a blouse one size too big, and a badge clipped to my belt like a shackle. Floor 17, the robotic voice announced, pulling me back into the rhythm of my day. I stepped out, greeted by the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet tapping of keyboards. Another Tuesday in a building full of people pretending this wasn't where souls went to die. Morning, Alex. Tyler from accounting flashed me his usual grin as I passed his cubicle, too bright for this early, but harmless. I forced a smile back. Morning. That was the extent of most conversations here. Pleasant noises exchanged out of habit. I didn't mind. The less talking, the faster the day blurred by. By noon, the chill had settled deeper into my skin, like I'd been standing outside in winter without a coat. I rubbed my arms, glancing at the thermostat on the wall. 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Everyone else looked fine. Rachel was even fanning herself across the room, complaining about the stuffy air. Maybe I was coming down with something. Not surprising, considering my diet consisted of instant noodles and coffee. When 5 o'clock finally hit, I packed up without saying goodbye. No one noticed. I was just another ghost slipping out of the office. The headache pulsed behind my eyes as I walked down the crowded street, city noises blending into a dull roar. Horns blared. A street vendor shouted about hot dogs. Someone's music leaked through cheap earbuds. All of it felt distant. I stopped at the corner store like always, grabbing a cheap microwave meal and a bottle of water. The cashier, a girl with pink hair and too many bracelets, barely looked up as she scanned my items. "That'll be $6.42, she mumbled, chewing gum. I handed over a crumpled bill, our fingers brushing for half a second as she gave me change. Her skin was warm, too warm compared to how cold mine felt. I didn't think twice about it. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky was bleeding orange into deep blue. I tossed the meal onto the counter, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. The TV remote was somewhere, but I didn't have the energy to find it. I must have dozed off because the next thing I heard were sirens. Blaring. Close. I dragged myself to the window, peering down at the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the buildings. 2 ambulances. A crowd gathering around the corner store. My stomach twisted. Not in fear, just a strange sense of detachment. Curiosity kept me glued to my phone. I opened Twitter and started scrolling. It didn't take long before I saw a post. At City Watcher NYC. Ambulance at Green Mart on 5th. Someone collapsed inside? I stared at the screen for a moment, thumb hovering over the refresh button. Probably some random customer or an old guy. A sharp pulse hit behind my eyes again, forcing me to sit down. I pressed my fingers to my temples, chalking it all up to stress. Still, I couldn't shake the cold creeping through my veins, or the way my reflection in the darkened window seemed just a little too pale. I didn't sleep much that night. The headache faded into a dull throb, but the chill never left. I piled on 2 blankets, socks, even dug out the old hoodie from college that smelled like forgotten dreams, but nothing warmed me up. By morning, my phone alarm felt more like a mercy kill than a wake-up call. I dragged myself to the bathroom, flicking on the light. The face staring back at me looked wrong. Paler than usual, like I'd been sitting under fluorescent lights for too long. The kind of sickly hue that no amount of makeup could fix. I pressed a hand to my cheek, cold. Maybe I was getting sick. Flu, anemia, whatever. Not like I had a doctor on speed dial. I threw on clothes, skipped breakfast, and made it to the office 5 minutes late. No one noticed. Or cared. The day crawled. I couldn't focus. Words blurred on the screen. Numbers stopped making sense. Every time I stood up, a wave of dizziness made the floor tilt under my feet. I brushed it off, told myself I'd Google symptoms later and probably ignore them anyway. Around lunchtime, Rachel's voice cut through the haze. "Did you hear about Tyler?" I blinked, looking up from my untouched sandwich. "What?" She leaned over the cubicle wall, her expression a mix of gossip hunger and genuine concern. "He didn't show up today. Someone said he didn't wake up." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Rachel lowered her voice. "His roommate found him this morning. They think it was like a heart attack or something in his sleep. That didn't make sense. Tyler was young, healthier than most of us, always bragging about his morning jogs and protein shakes. That's awful, I said quietly. Rachel sighed. Yeah, crazy. She lingered for a moment, then drifted away, probably eager to spread the news. I sat there, replaying yesterday in my head, not out of suspicion, but because hearing someone you just saw had died was surreal. I remembered passing Tyler on my way out last night. He dropped his pen, and I'd picked it up, handing it to him without thinking. Barely a second, fingers brushing as he took it from me. I shook the thought off. People died. Random, horrible things happened. When I got home that evening, I collapsed onto the couch, too drained to even pretend I'd cook. The microwave meal sat untouched on the counter. I scrolled through my phone out of habit. A local news alert popped up. Second sudden death reported in Midtown. I locked the screen without reading more. It wasn't like I really knew the person. Just another tragedy in a city full of them. A sharp pulse hit behind my eyes, forcing me to shut them tight. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. I wasn't sure if I was more tired or just empty. I told myself I'd call out sick tomorrow, sleep it off. Maybe actually see a doctor if I felt worse. But deep down, I already knew. Sleep wasn't going to fix this. I didn't call out sick the next day. I tried, but staring at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Maybe it was guilt? Maybe I didn't want to give Rachel the satisfaction of being right when she inevitably whispered about me catching whatever Tyler had. So I dragged myself in. Every step to the office felt heavier than the last. My legs ached like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. The chill hadn't just settled in my bones. It felt like it was replacing them. When I caught my reflection in the building's glass doors, I paused. The dark circles under my eyes weren't from a bad night's sleep. My skin wasn't just pale. It was almost gray. Like something you'd see in a hospital bed, not walking around Midtown. I pulled my sleeves down further, hiding the way my wrists looked thinner than they had a week ago. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. I kept my distance from the guy standing next to me, not out of fear, but because I was pretty sure I smelled like stale sweat and whatever sickness was chewing through me. As soon as I reached my floor, I made a beeline for my desk, head down. I could feel people glancing at me. Or maybe I was imagining it. I kept my eyes glued to the screen, pretending to work. Around noon, I heard a voice I didn't recognize, too upbeat for a place like this. Hey, you dropped this. I looked up to see some new intern, bright-eyed, fresh out of college, holding out a sticky note I hadn't realized had fallen off my desk. Before I could say anything, she pressed it into my hand with a cheerful smile. Wouldn't want you losing your reminders. Her fingers brushed mine. Warm, alive. I forced a weak smile. Thanks. She walked away, humming to herself. I stared at the note in my hand, a strange pit forming in my stomach, but I didn't know why. By 3 p.m., the office was buzzing louder than usual. Whispers, people standing instead of working. I pulled out my earbuds and caught fragments of conversation. Just collapsed. No one knows what happened. She was fine this morning. I stood up, heart thudding in my chest. Rachel spotted me and rushed over, wide-eyed. Did you hear? That new intern, Jess or Jenny or something, she just dropped. My mouth went dry. What? Paramedics are here right now. They said she was dead before she hit the floor. The words echoed in my skull. Dead. Before she hit the floor. I sat down slowly, my fingers numb. First Tyler, now her. No. I wasn't doing this. People got sick. Freak things happened. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let my brain spiral into the kind of paranoia that kept conspiracy forums alive. I just needed to get home. I grabbed my bag and muttered something about not feeling well. No one questioned it. The subway ride felt like a fever dream. I kept my hands stuffed in my pockets, avoiding every accidental brush and bump like I was suddenly allergic to human contact. By the time I stumbled through my apartment door, my body felt hollow, like I was running on fumes. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling as the room spun gently around me. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. Another buzz. And another. With a groan, I reached for it, squinting at the screen. Rachel. They're saying it was her heart. Same as Tyler. 2 healthy people dropping dead in 2 days? WTF. Another message popped up before I could respond. Also, did you hear about that cashier from Green Mart? Same thing. Some kind of freak heart failure. I let the phone slip from my hand, my pulse pounding in my ears. 3 people, all within days, all people I'd touched. No, I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head. It was coincidence. It had to be. I was sick, that's all. Probably something contagious, something explainable. That's what I told myself as I stood in front of the mirror, forcing my hair into something that resembled presentable. The pallor of my skin could be blamed on bad lighting. The hollow look in my eyes? A few nights of missed sleep? People got sick and bounced back all the time. So on Monday morning, I went back to work. The office greeted me with the usual hum of computers and the faint smell of burnt coffee. No one gave me more than a passing glance, except Rachel, who raised an eyebrow as I walked past. "You look like hell," she whispered. "Thanks," I muttered, sinking into my chair. By noon, I was regretting every decision that led me here. The dizziness hadn't left. It just dulled into a constant haze, like I was walking through water. My fingers felt stiff, colder than they should be, but I kept typing, pretending numbers on a screen mattered. When I reached for a report, my hand brushed against Mark's, one of the guys from sales who never learned what personal space was. "Oh, sorry," he said, flashing a grin as he handed me the folder. I pulled my hand back quickly, more out of instinct than anything else. Stay away from everyone. The whisper gnawed at me, but I buried it under logic. It was nothing. By the time 5 o'clock hit, I was running on fumes. I grabbed my bag and left without saying a word. The next morning, I walked into a buzz of conversation, voices hushed but urgent. I caught Rachel's eye, and she hurried over. "Did you hear about Mark?" My stomach tightened. "What about him?" She lowered her voice. "He's dead. Happened last night. Robbery gone wrong. They found him in an alley near his apartment." I stared at her, the words sinking in like stones tied to my chest. "Jesus." It was all I could manage. Rachel nodded, crossing her arms. "I mean, what are the odds? First Tyler, then that intern, now Mark? It's like bad luck's hitting everyone around here." I forced a hollow laugh, shaking my head. Yeah, crazy. But my hands were trembling. I spent the rest of the day glued to my chair, heart pounding every time someone walked by. When I left the office, I kept my head down, moving fast through the crowded streets. The next death came 2 days later. I was at the pharmacy, picking up vitamins and flu meds I knew wouldn't help, when the cashier reached out to grab the bottle from my hand. Our fingers brushed, just for a second. I barely noticed it. But that night, scrolling through my phone, I saw the headline, "Local woman mauled in dog attack outside apartment complex." I didn't need to read the article to know who it was. My throat tightened as I set the phone down, a cold sweat breaking across my skin. This wasn't coincidence anymore, but I wasn't ready to admit it. Not fully. Not until the next time. The delivery guy showed up at my door the following evening. Some soup I ordered just to pretend I still ate. When I reached for the bag, our hands touched. His smile didn't fade. He just nodded and walked away. I stood there, staring at my hand like it was something foreign, something dangerous. No. Stop it. You're losing it, Alex. But the next afternoon, I heard the news through a neighbor's door. Poor kid. Hit by a car on his route. My ears rang. I stumbled back into my apartment, locking the door behind me. That's when the real fear set in. I didn't leave the apartment for 2 days after that. When I finally did, I kept my gloves on tight, sleeves pulled over them. I avoided eye contact. I didn't speak to anyone. But doubt ate at me. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was spiraling over nothing. So I tested it. There was a stray cat that lingered near the dumpsters behind my building. Mangy, but friendly enough. I crouched down, pulling off one glove, my heart racing like I was about to commit a crime. The cat rubbed against my hand, purring softly. Nothing happened. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. See? It's nothing. You're just sick, paranoid. The next day, on my way home, I saw it. The same cat, lying twisted on the side of the road. Its body limp, blood pooling beneath it where a car had run it down. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The world felt distant, like I was underwater, watching everything move in slow motion. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't coincidence. It was me. I stopped counting the days after that. What was the point? Time didn't feel linear anymore. Not when every hour bled into the next, marked only by the steady hum of my refrigerator and the occasional distant wail of sirens outside. I didn't go back to work, didn't answer Rachel's texts, didn't order food. But I still tried to pretend life was normal. A few days ago, when I was still convincing myself this was just some strange illness, I forced myself outside. I told myself I needed fresh air. Something warm. Something human. The coffee shop near my office felt like a safe choice. It was quiet, familiar, forgettable. I grabbed some gloves. My sleeves were pulled low, but I wasn't exactly focused. The world felt blurry around the edges. I ordered without thinking, my voice barely above a whisper. When they called my name, I reached for the cup on the counter, but my hand trembled, weak from days without real food or rest. The cup slipped from my fingers, nearly toppling over. Before I could react, a hand shot out, not for the cup, but for me. The barista grabbed my wrist, steadying me. Bare skin. His fingers wrapped around the small gap where my sleeve had slipped up, just above the glove. "Whoa, gotcha," he said, flashing a tired but genuine smile. "Careful." I pulled back quickly, heart skipping. Not because of suspicion, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched. I mumbled a thanks, grabbed the cup with my other hand, and hurried out without looking back. I told myself it was nothing. That was days ago. Now, the whispers had started. At first, I thought it was the neighbors. Paper-thin walls, muffled voices. It wasn't unusual. But when I pressed my ear to the door, I realized the hallway was silent. The whispers were coming from behind me. I turned sharply, heart pounding in my chest, but the apartment was empty. Just the shadows stretching longer than they should have in the corners of the room. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. The whispers followed me. Soft, unintelligible murmurs that grew louder when the lights were off. Words I couldn't make out, but I could feel them, slithering under my skin like a language not meant for the living. Then came the figures. At first, it was just flickers, movements I could blame on tricks of the eye, the way darkness plays with a tired mind. But they stayed longer each time. I could see them now. They weren't just shadows, they had shape. Faces, blurred and broken, eyes hollow, mouths frozen mid-scream. The air around them felt heavier, colder, like they dragged a silence that screamed with them wherever they stood. The dead. And among them, towering and still cloaked in something darker than night, stood what I could only describe as the end itself. It didn't speak. It didn't move. It just watched. I tried to drown them out, kept the TV on, music playing, but the static only made them clearer, like they lived in the spaces between sound. One evening, I cracked. I needed out, even if just for a breath that didn't taste like fear. I wrapped myself tight, gloves, hoodie, sleeves tugged down until no skin showed, and stepped into the city. The world moved around me like I didn't exist. A stray dog rounded a corner ahead, tail wagging, until it saw me. It froze, ears flat, before turning and sprinting away with a panicked whine. I kept walking. Birds scattered from the wires above. A cat hissed from a distant alley. Even insects seemed to vanish from my path. I wasn't part of this world anymore. Halfway down the block, shouting snapped me back. Two men, arguing near a storefront. One shoved the other hard, sending him stumbling into traffic. A horn blared. The sound of metal meeting flesh followed. I didn't need to look, but I did. The barista lay twisted on the asphalt, blood seeping into the cracks of the pavement. His hand, the same one that had steadied my wrist, was outstretched, fingers curled toward nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't run to help. I just stood there, numb. Because now I understood. It didn't matter how it happened. Didn't matter if it was peaceful or violent. If I touched them, death followed. Always. I turned away, walking faster, heart pounding, not from panic, from certainty. When I reached my apartment, I slammed the door shut and locked every bolt. The figures were waiting for me. This time, they didn't fade when I stared at them. They surrounded me, silent, patient, the dead pressing against the thin veil of my reality. They stood in the corners, motionless, shrouded in darkness thicker than shadow. Their shapes were wrong, stretched like silhouettes barely holding together. I couldn't see faces. I didn't want to. But behind them, towering above them all, the figure cloaked in black, the fabric hanging like smoke, shifting without wind. Beneath the hood, there was nothing but hollow darkness where a face should be. I didn't need to see the details to feel the weight of its presence pressing into my chest, suffocating me. A long, bony hand gripped something beside it. Tall, gleaming even in the dark. A scythe. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I didn't know what I was looking at, but every part of me knew I wasn't supposed to see it. My legs gave out and I sank to the floor, trembling, eyes locked on the hooded figure as the others loomed just beyond it, silent, unmoving. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. "Wake up. Please," I whispered, voice cracking. But when I opened them again, they hadn't moved. They didn't need to. They were waiting for something. I just didn't know what. I don't remember how long I sat there, curled against the wall, knees to my chest, staring at the figures that refused to leave, even when I begged them to. The hooded one never moved. It didn't need to. Its presence was enough to make every breath feel like a mistake. Eventually, exhaustion won. My eyes grew too heavy to fight, my body too weak to care if they were still watching. When I woke, daylight was bleeding through the cracks in my curtains. The apartment was empty. At least, it looked that way. I didn't trust it. I pulled myself to my feet, legs shaking beneath me. My throat was dry, burning, really, but the idea of drinking water felt pointless. I couldn't remember the last time anything tasted real. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection and immediately wished I hadn't. I looked worse, thinner, pallid, like my skin was draining of color by the hour. My lips had taken on a bluish tint, and my eyes... They didn't look like mine anymore. Too dark around the edges, too hollow. I reached out, touching the mirror with a gloved hand, half expecting frost to spread across the glass. It didn't. But the air felt colder where I stood. I stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the sink until the dizziness passed. This wasn't sustainable. I couldn't hide in here forever, not when my mind was fraying at the edges, and the walls felt like they were closing in more each day. I needed answers, or at least to hear a voice that wasn't whispering from the dark. I checked my phone. Over a dozen missed calls and messages from Rachel. Most were from days ago. But one stood out, sent just this morning. "Rachel, Alex, I'm serious. If you don't call me back today, I'm coming over." Panic tightened in my chest. I couldn't let her do that. I couldn't risk it. With shaking fingers, I typed out a reply. "I'm fine. Just sick. Please don't come." The dots appeared almost immediately. She was waiting for me. "Rachel, you've been sick for over a week. This isn't normal. You need to see someone." I didn't respond. What could I say? That I was being hunted by shadows? That everyone I touched died horribly? Instead, I threw on my hoodie, double-checked my gloves, and forced myself out the door before Rachel decided to show up uninvited. The streets felt different now. People walked past me, but no one looked at me. Not really. It was like I didn't exist. Like their eyes slid right off me before they even realized I was there. I kept my head down, avoiding every brush of a shoulder, every accidental graze. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just walked. Block after block, hoping the movement would clear my head. It didn't. Every reflective surface, store windows, car mirrors, caught flickers of them. The dead. Following. Always just a step behind where I wasn't looking. And somewhere in the distance, I could feel the weight of that hooded figure, like gravity pulling at my soul, even when I couldn't see it. I turned a corner and nearly collided with a man walking his dog. The leash snapped taut as the golden retriever growled, low and vicious, fur bristling as it bared its teeth at me. The man yanked it back, muttering an apology without meeting my gaze. I hurried past, heart racing. When I glanced over my shoulder, the dog was still watching me, whining now, tail tucked between its legs, backing away like it had seen something far worse than me. I didn't stop walking until my legs gave out on a park bench miles from home. I sat there, staring at nothing, the world moving around me like I was a ghost haunting a place I no longer belonged to. Somewhere nearby, I heard sirens. A scream followed. Not panicked, but sharp. Sudden. I didn't need to look to know what happened. I already knew the pattern. Whoever it was, I'd touched them too. I don't know how I made it home. I barely remembered walking through the door, or collapsing onto the floor, or how long I laid there staring at nothing. But when the sun rose again, weak and colorless through my window, I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I was falling apart, inside and out. My hands shook uncontrollably when I tried to drink water. My reflection was a stranger, skin pale and drawn tight, lips cracked, dark circles hollowing out my eyes. I didn't know if I was dying or worse, if I wasn't allowed to. Either way, I couldn't just sit in that apartment waiting to disappear. So I did the only thing left. I went to the hospital. Not because I believed they could fix me, but because I needed to hear someone tell me what was wrong. Something real. Something with a name. I covered up as much as I could, hood pulled low, gloves tight around my wrists, and kept my distance from everyone as I walked through the automatic doors. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. I kept my gaze on the floor as I signed in, avoiding every glance that drifted my way. When they called my name, I followed the nurse down the hallway, counting every step, every breath, like I could hold myself together by sheer will. The exam room was too bright, too clean. I sat stiffly on the edge of the table, my pulse thudding in my ears louder than any clock on the wall. When the doctor entered, he gave me a polite, practiced smile, the kind you give to flu patients and hypochondriacs. Alexandra, right? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He glanced at his chart. Says here you're experiencing fatigue, chills, dizziness. He looked up, eyes narrowing slightly as he took in my appearance. How long have you been feeling like this? I swallowed hard. Over a week. He set the chart down and pulled on a pair of gloves. Let's start simple. I'll check your pulse, and we'll go from there. I hesitated, glancing down at my gloved hands. He noticed. It's all right. I'll be quick. Reluctantly, I removed one glove, my fingers trembling as I offered him my wrist. His touch was clinical, 2 fingers pressed lightly against my skin. For a moment, it was normal. Then I felt it. That drop in temperature. The way his breath hitched, so subtle anyone else would have missed it. His brow furrowed as he glanced at his watch, still counting. I wanted to pull away. I should have pulled away. But I was frozen, staring at the way the color drained from his face. Not all at once, but gradually, like a candle burning down too fast. His lips parted like he was about to speak, but the words never came. His knees buckled. I caught him out of instinct, but the second my hand touched his arm, his body seized violently. Veins darkened beneath his skin, his eyes rolling back as he collapsed to the floor in a silent heap. I stumbled back, heart racing, my bare hand shaking uncontrollably. The door opened. Someone shouted. I didn't look back. I ran, through the hallway, past nurses and patients who barely registered me as more than a blur. I didn't stop until the cold night air hit my lungs like ice. I kept moving, through streets I didn't recognize, under flickering streetlights, until my legs gave out somewhere far from the hospital, far from anyone who could accidentally brush past me. I sat there, hunched against a wall, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. There was no more pretending. No more doctors. No more answers. Whatever I was now, there was no cure, and everyone I touched would pay for it. The days after the hospital blurred together. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I barely moved from the spot where I collapsed after locking myself inside. The shadows thickened, no longer content with corners. The dead stood openly now, silent shapes that filled the apartment like unwanted guests I couldn't throw out. And always, behind them, that towering figure lingered, hooded, unmoving, the faint glint of a scythe ever present in my peripheral vision. I kept waiting for my heart to stop, for my body to give out. But it didn't. It just kept getting colder. The knock at the door came after what I guessed was a week, firm, familiar. I froze, breath shallow, my back pressed to the wall as if that could make me invisible. Another knock, louder this time. Then her voice. Alexandra? Open the door, baby? Please. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I forced myself to my feet, legs weak and unsteady as I stumbled toward the door. Go home, Mom. My voice cracked, barely audible. I've been calling you for days. You won't answer. What's going on? Her voice wavered, half worry, half frustration. I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the door. I'm sick. You can't be here. There was a pause, and I could hear her exhale, trying to stay calm. Then let me help. I'll call someone. We'll go to a doctor. No. My voice came sharper this time, panic lacing every syllable. No doctors. No one can fix this. Another long silence. When she spoke again, it was softer, like she was talking to a frightened child. Just let me in. We'll figure it out together, all right? My hand hovered over the lock, shaking. I didn't want to see her. Didn't want her to see me. But I knew she wouldn't leave. Not until she knew I was alive. I slid the bolt back slowly, every instinct screaming that this was a mistake. When the door opened, I kept my distance, standing deep in the shadows as she stepped inside. Her breath caught the moment her eyes landed on me. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The horror on her face said enough. I turned away, pulling my sleeves down over hands that barely looked human anymore. "I told you not to come," I whispered. She closed the door behind her, her movements slow, like she was afraid any sudden motion might shatter whatever fragile thing stood between us. I felt her eyes scanning the apartment, the darkness that seemed to swallow every corner, the oppressive cold that no heater could fight. "When's the last time you ate?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound steady. I didn't answer. She moved toward the kitchen, keeping her distance, but clearly trying to distract herself, grabbing a kettle, fumbling with cabinets. "I'll make you something warm. You'll feel better once you eat, okay?" I stayed rooted in place, watching her like a warning. "You shouldn't be here," I said again, but it came out weaker this time, more plea than command. She avoided looking directly at me now, focusing instead on busy hands, finding tea bags, setting a mug on the counter, like pretending this was normal could make it so. When she finally dared a glance at me, her eyes were glassy, tears she refused to let fall. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "Whatever it is." I turned away, swallowing the lump in my throat. She didn't understand. She couldn't. No matter how badly she wanted to believe otherwise, no matter how many times she whispered promises we both knew were empty, she couldn't fix this. I stayed as far from her as the apartment would allow, every muscle tense, watching her pace nervously between the kitchen and living room. She kept glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking, her expression a mix of confusion, fear, and that motherly instinct to do something, even when there was nothing left to do. Her hands trembled as she set a cup of tea on the table near me. I didn't move. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt warmth. Not from a drink, not from sunlight, not from a human touch. She sat down across from me, wringing her hands in her lap, searching for words that didn't exist. "You've always been stubborn," she said softly, forcing a small, watery smile. "But this isn't something you can push through alone." I looked away, my vision blurring as that familiar sting built behind my eyes. "Mom, please, don't come any closer." Her smile faltered, brow furrowing. "Alexandra, I mean it." My voice cracked, sharper than I intended. "You can't touch me. No one can." She froze, confusion flashing across her face before shifting into something worse, concern laced with disbelief. "Sweetheart, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall, holding up my hands like that would keep her away. "Please, just listen. You can't." But she was already moving. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out and led, her instincts overpowering logic. Because what mother sees their child breaking and doesn't try to hold them together? "It's okay," she whispered through a sob. "I've got you." "No, don't." My legs gave out before I could finish. The room spun violently as the cold in my chest surged, stealing the strength from my body. I collapsed to the floor, vision dimming at the edges. I heard her gasp, felt her arms around me before I could crawl away. Bare hands gripping my shoulders, pulling me in like she could protect me from whatever monster I'd become. For a heartbeat, I felt human again, wrapped in the warmth of the only person who'd ever made me feel safe. Then her body tensed. I tried to pull back, but she held on, too tightly. Her breath hitched, a soft, broken sound escaping her lips. "Mom." My voice cracked as I watched her fingers lose their grip. Her skin paling, eyes widening in confusion and terror. She looked at me like she was seeing through me, like whatever tethered her to this world was slipping away by the second. Her knees buckled, and I caught her out of reflex, my hands shaking violently as I lowered her to the floor. "No, no." The words tumbled out in a frantic whisper as I cradled her against me, watching the life drain from her face. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but no sound came. And then she was gone. Her body sagged in my arms, unnaturally still. I stared down at her, the weight of her lifeless form pressing into me harder than any nightmare could. The first sob tore through me before I realized I was even crying. I clutched her tighter, rocking back and forth on the cold floor as the walls closed in, the shadows thickening around us like vultures circling their prize. "I warned you." I choked out, my voice barely audible through the tears. "I told you not to come." But it didn't matter now. She was gone, and I was truly alone. I don't know how long I stayed there. Curled around her body, rocking gently like movement could somehow rewind time, undo what I'd done. The apartment was silent, but it wasn't empty. I could feel them. The dead pressed in closer than ever, their shapes no longer hiding in corners or reflections. They stood in plain sight now, surrounding me in a circle of hollow eyes and twisted forms. Some leaned in as if curious. Others loomed like they were waiting for a signal I couldn't hear. And behind them, heavier than all the rest, was him, the hooded figure. I didn't look at it. I didn't have to. Its presence crushed the air from my lungs, heavier than grief, colder than the body in my arms. I wanted to scream, to beg, to fight, but there was nothing left in me. I laid my mother down gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face with trembling fingers. Her skin was already losing warmth. A fresh wave of tears blurred my vision as I backed away, dragging myself across the floor until my spine hit the wall. My body felt weightless and heavy all at once, like I wasn't fully here anymore, like part of me had already crossed into whatever realm these figures belonged to. The whispers were gone now. There was no need for them. I understood everything I needed to. This was who I was, what I'd become. A shiver ran through me, not from fear, but from the absence of anything human left to feel. That's when the air shifted, thicker, darker. The dead parted without a sound, their hollow forms making way as the hooded figure moved forward. Slow, deliberate steps that didn't echo, like it wasn't bound by the rules of this world. The scythe trailed beside it, the blade gleaming despite the lack of light. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. When it stopped in front of me, the shadows around it pulsed, like the apartment itself recognized who truly owned this space now. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the figure knelt. The scythe stood upright on its own, as if anchored by something unseen. I forced my gaze upward, my heart pounding against ribs that felt too fragile to contain it. The hood shifted, slowly lowering to reveal what hid beneath. A skull. Pale bone, cracked with age, hollow sockets where eyes should have been. But as I stared, the bone began to change, flesh creeping over it, features forming. The face of a man emerged, sharp, gaunt, with eyes that held centuries of knowing. Human. Or at least, it had been. My throat tightened as I croaked out the only question that mattered. What am I? His gaze didn't waver. His voice was a low whisper, steady, inevitable. Death. The word hit harder than any scream. I shook my head, tears streaking down my face. Why? Why me? His expression didn't change. Not cruel, not kind, just certain. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of something far older than I could comprehend. It wasn't fate. It wasn't random. You were chosen. The moment you chose yourself. My breath caught as confusion twisted in my chest, but before I could speak, his next words landed like a dagger. Do you remember the fire? The words shattered something inside me. My vision blurred as memories I'd buried clawed their way back, unwelcome and unstoppable. Smoke, embers, suffocating heat, and the screams. His voice continued, calm and relentless. A small apartment, a faulty wire, a spark in the night. I couldn't stop shaking, the images flooding in faster than I could fight them. You woke to the flames creeping under your door, smoke clawing at your lungs. You had seconds, just enough time to save yourself, or someone else. My hands curled into fists, nails digging into my palms as tears streamed down my face. No, please, I begged, but he didn't stop. But you made it out, alone. And then, like a cruel echo pulled from the deepest part of my mind, help! Alex! My brother's voice, young, terrified, screaming my name from the other side of the flames. I bit down on a sob, my whole body trembling as the memory consumed me. The sound that followed was worse. The raw, agonizing scream as the fire swallowed him whole. My lips quivered, words lost beneath the weight of guilt. His voice, death's voice, pressed on, steady and merciless. When they found you outside, shaking, covered in ash, they asked if anyone was still inside. And you said, nothing. I let out a broken gasp, my vision swimming with tears. They believed your silence. They stopped searching. Your brother burned alive while you watched the flames and said nothing. I collapsed further, my body folding in on itself as sobs tore through me. The figure moved closer to me now, its voice dropping to a whisper, empty of judgment, but heavier than anything I'd ever heard. And at the hospital, when your mother asked what happened, what did you say? I couldn't speak, but he answered for me. that you went back for him, that he pushed you out and sacrificed himself for you, that you couldn't get to him in time. I shattered, fully and completely, every breath choking on the weight of his retelling. My forehead pressed to the floor, hands clutching my head as if I could block out the truth. But Death's voice carried on, final and absolute. That was the day Death noticed you. Not because you were heartless, but because you were human. You heard his screams, Alexandra, the protector who didn't protect. A failed protector. I whimpered through clenched teeth, tears soaking into the cold floor beneath me. His words didn't stop. We are not chosen for our virtues, nor our sins, but for the burdens we already bear, for knowing what it means to let go and live with the weight. You became a candidate the moment you walked away from life and left it behind in the fire. The world around me felt like it was collapsing, like the shadows were swallowing every last piece of who I thought I was. His final words echoed through the darkness, sealing my fate. Now, you'll carry every soul. You'll hear every cry for help, every final breath, but you will never answer. You are the collector, the watcher, the bringer of death. This is your burden, Alexandra, the price of survival. I stared at him, what was left of him, as the air around us began to shift. His skeletal features softened, the bone giving way to flesh, color returning to hollow cheeks. The darkness in his eyes faded, replaced by something deeply human. Warmth, relief, freedom. And as life returned to him, I felt it leaving me. My hands grew lighter, not in weight, but in substance. Skin withered, pulling tight before dissolving altogether, revealing pale bone beneath. I raised them slowly, watching as my fingers, once trembling with fear, became the sharp, skeletal hands I had seen gripping that scythe. My face, I could feel it changing. The last remnants of warmth, of identity, draining away. Emotion slipped from me like water through open fingers. No sorrow, no fear, no pain, just emptiness. A stillness I couldn't fight. The man, no longer Death, smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. Not triumphant, not cruel, just free. As his human form brightened for a moment, he gave me one last look, and understanding passed from one bearer to the next. And then he was gone. The shadows swallowed him whole, leaving only silence and the scythe standing beside me. I stood tall, skeletal hands wrapping around the handle with the ease of someone who'd always known this weight. The apartment dissolved around me, peeling away into a vast gray expanse where the boundary between life and death no longer existed. I could see both worlds now, the living, unaware of my presence, and the dead, waiting in the quiet. The first soul appeared before me, a child, small and fragile, eyes wide with fear and confusion. I didn't speak, didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. I stepped forward, the scythe steady in my grasp, purpose guiding me where emotion no longer could. As the child's form shimmered beneath the weight of what came next, the last thought that echoed in the hollow of my mind wasn't regret. It was truth. The price of my survival.